as a On midsummer morning, a sunbeam enters the heart of a great stone circle, lighting up the altar. In midwinter, at dawn, the rays of the sun shine down the long passage of an Irish burial mound, lighting up an ancient chamber of the dead. The burial mound at Newgrange, the great stone circle of Stonehenge. Who built them? How? And why? What mysteries lie hidden in these ancient stones? "5,000 years ago, at the very dawn of civilization, a simple farming people with only primitive skills and tools flourished for a time, then disappeared from history, leaving barely a trace to tell us who they were. Their only legacy, thousands of great tombs and enormous stone monuments all across the land. Is it any wonder so many have believed they were built by giants, or wizards, or were homes of the gods? There was still no written language when these massive stones were somehow levered into place. And yet these awesome structures could accurately track the orbits of the sun, stars, and moon, suggesting an understanding of the cosmos far from primitive. The burial chambers came first, temples of the dead where ancestors were worshipped. Not just one, but a cluster of 40 form an extraordinary ancient cemetery in the Boyne River Valley in eastern Ireland. Among the most magnificent and mysterious is Newgrange. Its ancient builders heaped a huge mound of earth within a circle of large curbstones engraved with strange patterns. On the side overlooking the Boyne River, they built a shiny wall of white quartz. At its center, the entrance leads along a dark stone passage into a great chamber. Here, they kept the bones of their dead. And on the shortest day of the year, when the winter wind blew cold and the earth was barren, a beam of light from the rising sun lights up the strange patterns on the chamber wall. It told the people that the cycle of life would soon begin again, that soon the wind would blow warm, it would be time to plant, and the earth would bloom again. Around 2500 BC, the first stone circles appeared. Supreme among them is Stonehenge, the place of the hanging stones, standing high on the chalk plains of southern England. A celestial observatory of uncanny accuracy, Stonehenge is aligned to the rising and setting of the sun and moon, suggesting that the focus of worship had shifted from ancestors to the heavens, and perhaps the gods. Throughout history, Stonehenge has mesmerized countless generations, with stories of wizards and kings, prayer, prophecy, and murder. Many have tried to solve the puzzle of these stones. In the 12th century, the tale was told that Stonehenge was built to commemorate the massacre of British chiefs in a great battle known as the Treachery of the Long Knives. Some have believed it was the wizard Merlin who used his sorcery and magical powers to bring the giant stones across the sea from a monument in Ireland. And in one story, Merlin is described practicing the art of prophecy by observing the sun, planets, and stars from a strange building with 70 windows and doors. Could this have been Stonehenge as well? For many, this is a spiritual, magical place. Water washed over the stones was said to have healing powers. As late as the 18th century, it was believed that if the stones were rubbed or scraped and water thrown upon the scrapings, they will heal any green wound or old sore. A piece of stone put into a well was supposed to banish toads and other venomous creatures. In 1640, King James I commissioned the architect Inigo Jones to make the first proper study of Stonehenge. But because Jones believed the ancient Britons were a barbarous, primitive people, wholly incapable of such sophistication, Jones credited the building of Stonehenge to the Romans, who invaded England in the 1st century AD. But Jones's history was a little off. The Romans were thousands of years too late. A few decades after Jones's study, it was John Aubrey who first suggested Stonehenge was a temple, a place of worship for the Druids, the ancient British cult said to be skilled in the arts of magic, prophecy, and healing. But even the Druids were too late, arriving in Britain 1,500 years after the heyday of Stonehenge. One of the earliest and most mysterious references to what may be Stonehenge comes from the ancient Greeks. In 350 BC, a Greek writer mentioned an island behind the north wind and an impressive spherical temple decorated with many offerings, dedicated to the sun god Apollo. Could it be that long after Stonehenge had been abandoned, its secrets were passed down to the learned Greeks? The ancient stones of Britain are the only clues that remain to a people who built great monuments to their dead, calculated the orbits of the stars, then disappeared. Perhaps they told us about themselves in these ancient stone riddles, but to find the answers we must travel back before time to the realm of prehistory. Before Abraham of the Bible, before the pyramids, before the Tower of Babylon, 7,000 years ago, a long-forgotten people came to the British Isles in skin boats laden with seed corn and farm animals. Using stone axes, they cleared patches of forest and began cultivating the soil for the first time. They lived by the cycles of the earth. In time, their farms flourished. But life was hard. Many children died in infancy, and only about a third of them survived to their 30s. A man of 40 was old, and anyone who reached 50, very rare. Life was precious, and the great burial chambers may have simply honored their dead. Perhaps ancestors were thought to have supernatural powers, and offerings made here, with prayers for their protection and guidance, were a form of worship for the natural order of the seasons. When all life depended so much on the cycle of life, death and rebirth, the midwinter sunrise, when the days would begin to grow longer, must have seemed a critical and fragile time. A time to pray for the fertility of the land to return, so their livestock and crops would be abundant once again. Some believe the great tomb at Newgrange also represented the earth goddess. The inner chamber, her womb. The sun, it was said, was the male sky god. The shaft of light entering her chamber on the midwinter solstice, his life-bearing seed. In this way, Newgrange would symbolically fertilize the earth for another year. This sacred marriage of sky and earth, male and female, was specially potent for taking place at the darkest time of the year. over the bones of the dead, when the earth most needed rebirth. The rebirth of the earth each year must have seemed a miracle. The burial chambers of Ireland's Boyne Valley may have also been crude calendars, tracking the cycles of the sun, moon, and stars. In a primitive farming society, to predict the seasons, to seem to have power over the movements of the heavens, could anything be more sacred? Could anyone wield greater power? And by predicting the movement of the sun, did they also hope they could control it, in effect, assuring the return of the light, the return of the spring, and the rebirth of all things? "2,500 years before the birth of Christ, the people of ancient Britain turned away from worshipping the dead. Gods, represented by the sun, moon, and stars, were the new divinity. And stone circles, their new temples. Supreme among them was Stonehenge, at the time the ritual center for southern Britain. For 2,000 years, from 3,100 BC to 1,100 BC, the people here filled the rolling landscape with a dense concentration of burial monuments, processional routes, ceremonial pits, and sacred enclosures. Nearby is Avebury, where 100 stones once enclosed 2 smaller circles. And Silbury Hill, the largest man-made mound in Europe. But of all these prehistoric wonders, Stonehenge remains the greatest mystery. Who built it? How? And could the wizard Merlin possibly have been involved? The people who built Stonehenge lived in round houses with thatched roofs. There were no towns, but each tribal group had a ceremonial center where they met for ritual and festivity. There is little evidence of defensive structures, suggesting a peaceful way of life. They were farmers and hunters who lived in harmony with the land. Their clothing was mostly of leather, but they also made garments of brown wool. Stonehenge was begun around 3000 BC, as little more than a circular bank and ditch, the main structure built of wood. Around 2150 BC, the axis was shifted to reorient the entire monument towards the rising sun at the midsummer solstice. And it was around this time that the first of the great stones, the so-called blue stones, was moved into place. Weighing up to 4 tons each, they were hauled over land and water from the mountains of South Wales, more than 125 miles away. But here, history echoes legend. The story of Merlin bringing stones across the water from an existing monument in Ireland. South Wales could easily have been confused with Ireland, and it is likely that the blue stones were already part of a sacred stone circle there. No doubt the entire operation was supervised by a Merlin-like high priest of considerable talent and knowledge. After the arrival of the blue stones, around 2100 BC, Stonehenge as we know it today took shape. Next came the main outer circle of 30 sarsen stones that supported a continuous curved stone lintel. And then the inner horseshoe of 5 great trilithons, each consisting of 2 enormous uprights supporting a stone lintel, like a freestanding doorway. The largest of these weighs 50 tons and stands 16 feet off the ground. How did they do it? It would have taken 1,000 men 7 weeks to haul a single sarsen on a sled from its source 24 miles away. Or 135 oxen, supervised by 30 men. Either way, just moving the sarsens would have taken more than a decade. Then they had to be dressed. Sarsens are 3 times harder than granite, so shaping them would have taken many more years still. The lintels were levered up on a gradually rising timber platform, then fixed in place using carpentry-style joints. With the available tools, it would have taken at least 500 men another 40 or 50 years to complete the outer circle alone. It's likely the stories of Merlin were based on dim folk memories of wizard-like architects who oversaw construction of the massive monument. The story of a strange building with 70 windows and doors, where Merlin observed the stars and predicted the future, also suggests a link with Stonehenge.
If you're actually in the center of the stones and you look around you, first of all, there are 30 huge stones, the big sarsens, which provide, obviously 30 gaps. Then you have 60 blue stones inside them. That actually means you have many windows to look through. Stonehenge and such stone circles, they're built so the main celestial phenomena, such as the solstice, sunrises and sunsets, the moon rises, the moon sets, and the star rises and star sets, they will actually be visible through some of these gaps. And I reckon that anyone who's inside those stones has got all of these phenomena at their fingertips.
But why? When life was so hard and tools so primitive, what passions inspired such a monumental task? What secrets are hidden in the hanging stones of Salisbury Plain? In the whole temple, one stone is unique. At dawn on the longest day of the year, a sunbeam pierces the heart of the monument, lighting up the sandstone altar that glitters like a ball of tiny mirrors. This suggests that Stonehenge was indeed a solar temple, as the Greeks had thought. They wrote of a spherical temple on an island behind the north wind that was dedicated to Apollo, their sun god. At Stonehenge, he was not called Apollo, but would have had similar powers, like protecting crops and ripening the harvest. It's also possible that Stonehenge, like Apollo's temple in Greece, the Oracle at Delphi, was dedicated to the practice of prophecy. Was it here that Merlin looked up to the stars and saw the future of nations? Certainly, Stonehenge was used for celestial observation.
It had a lot to do with the heavens, not only with observation of the heavens, but that it's quite possible that the pattern of the stones in some way reflected the pattern of heavenly bodies. In Gaul, an amazing discovery was made at the end of the last century of the famous calendar of Coligny, which is preserved on bronze tablets, and it's a calendar for the whole year. And recent scholars have suggested that it is an astonishing piece, which even modern computers have only just been able to catch up with its capacities. It can only have come into being as a result of literally centuries of observation of the heavens and noting of records by Druids, and I suspect, again, this is what was one of the things that happened at Stonehenge.
It may also have played a part in consecrating the relationship between king and land. echoing the symbolic marriage between Earth Goddess and Sky God that seems to have taken place at Newgrange.
I think that it was the historic navel or centre of Britain, and hence that's where, for example, I suspect that the king would have engaged in the marriage with the queen and with the sovereignty.
Stonehenge, then, was probably a temple to an ancient British sun god, a place of prophecy, a celestial observatory, and a sacred site where kings were invested with their authority. The people who built Stonehenge sustained their pastoral way of life longer than any subsequent culture, nearly 3,000 years. Then, around 1200 BC, society in Britain began to change. It became more militarized. The landscape was soon dominated by hill forts rather than sacred burial mounds and stone circles. Something was lost forever. Now, we are left with the ruins of Stonehenge, unique in all the world, reminders of the peaceful solar age of prehistoric Britain. Part of a sacred landscape of great monuments to the human spirit. To this day, Stonehenge inspires reverence and awe, with every people finding new meaning in these ancient stones.
Stonehenge is incredible. Stonehenge has been there now 4,000 years. I think in that time it has been refined and refined and refined to be one of the most ultimate temple spaces you could ever imagine. And I believe that it was built on that spot because the conditions there, or the earth energies there, the celestial phenomena that occur there are unique for its unique purpose. It is regarded by almost all cultures as a major energy point, not only in this country but also in the planet. But all you have to do is to spend time there, when you're invited there by the stones themselves, to know what I've just said without a shadow of a doubt.
For thousands of years, the early peoples of these islands lived with great respect for their ancestors. They worshipped the elemental energies of earth and sky, and the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. Perhaps that is why the ruins of their sacred landscape still touch a chord in us today. In the complexity and confusion of modern life, they offer both simplicity and mystery. The people who built Newgrange and Stonehenge left us more secrets than answers. No matter how much we learn, the reality of their lives will always elude us. In the end, there will always be the mysteries of the stones.